descriptions of the museum, and then we also discuss about the possibility of using the approach of the Museum for History of Ideas that is being done in UP Manila, although the focus is only on Western medicine, the development of Western medicine and the PGH. But we are discussing the idea of expanding it to a more holistic view of medicine by including indigenous, folk, Western, and energy medicine as exhibits. And then for Module 3, we have the interdisciplinary approach. So I'm using, since already discussed something about the mucha, so we're discussing it in terms of semantics, its variants in the Philippines, because there are about 32 to 34 variants in the Philippines. And then historically, it's part of the trade on precious stones. And there's a lot of folklore on mucha. There's also the mucha references in literature and the other arts, including painting, sculpture, etc. The other arts are there. And then in film, there is one, in television, in comics, and of course, it started as comics, and then the mucha in philosophy, religion, and spirituality, because there is, in the term mukta, as a pearl released from the shell, there is the idea of the soul versus the body. The shell is the body. But anyway, there's a whole literature on that. But this is done in piecemeal only. So for the next module, we have the mucha. This is now the thematic approach. So there, using that, we are if we have problems with the readings given, because usually there are readings, so I just apply how the mucha can be used as a theme. So one specific theme is the idea of a woman singing a sad song while or playing a musical instrument in the middle of the night. And there are already several goddesses with the theme, like Maria Sindikuan, Maria Makiling, and then of course the Mucha ng Pasig as the woman singing during full moon time, walking upon the waters. And then related to that is of course the concept of the Apsara, the images of the Apsaras and the Naga, the bird and the serpent motifs in Philippine arts and culture under thematic, under the themes in art. And then for module 5, we have this is art as a social, I think, the art as social practice. Then we have Ginhawang Bayan, because we have here, since we are not actually including this in the modular topics, I just added this as part of module 5, and this is the arts in relation to well-being, transformation, healing, etc. And then art as module 6, it's covered kasi I cannot really see it. Module 6 is art as popular culture. So we have the case of the Sari Manok and ABS-CBN. It's something traditional is being adopted by ABS-CBN, and there was a legal confrontation about this. So ABS-CBN did not pursue using the Sari Manok as its logo. And then the prominence of the Naga theme, the Jezebel theme as the mermaid in comics, television, and cinema, the bird maiden Apsaras as Darna. And then Art 7, art as cultural heritage, our symbol as our basis for identity construction and nation building. So I work on this and using the concept, the water goddess, as actually the mother, because the mother image, because in the mythology of Ausonians, it was highlighted that there is the prominence of the mother, and she is also a chief, but she is supposed to come from the water. So this really is so exact here. And this is also true not only for the Philippines, but other areas in Southeast Asia. And then for module 8, art as art as politics, of course, there is the discourse and the quarrel between Mutya ng Silangan and Perlas ng Silangan among poets following independence, no, and before the Second World War. But of course, the winning party was Perlas ng Silangan, and so that removed Mutya ng Silangan, the term, even in our national anthem. The degradation of the serpent and the crocodile as our ancestral water deity, they became associated with evil, no, and the demonization of the image of the balete as a native tree of life. Then the giving away of heirloom ring. I mean, in Ninay, she gave away the heirloom of the family that started the loss. So it's a symbol of the loss of power when you lose your cultural heritage. And so there is also art as public engagement. So you have there, how do you actually present something like an ally on a handog, the mixture between spirituality, religiosity, and art, no? The questions about um, how much of a performance is it? And then, of course, there is also a discussion on the trans state. But we discussed this because there are many trans dancing in Southeast Asia and in the Philippines. But we discussed the conflict, why people actually choose now semi-trans, because there is still consciousness. Anyway, that idea, the level of consciousness by which you participate even in spirituality. Then we go to module 10, investing in the arts. This is art and economy. The arts as alternative qualitative economics, in the sense that if I'm using here the mulcha as a form of valuation, pagpapahalaga and pagtatangi, the arts and technology. Of course, we discuss also the other things recommended, but this is what I'm just writing here are merely my insertions. And then module 11, we have the art and belief systems. So I just place it under the covering of convergence of art, science, spirituality, myth, and ecofeminism, to have an interaction between what is traditional knowledge systems and the present. So you have art as and self-transformation, art, new science, and vibrational medicine, art, myth, symbol, and Gaia. This is the ecological movement. And then probably art as a balancing act. Usually in UP, we are so critical and rational minded, no? But we forget about developing intuition. So I just put something there. It's not really highlighted, but just to introduce it. And then the art, science, and symbols. Then I now have for class requirements a homework, which is just reduced to reflection notes and the this museum report. The individual oral report, because the readings I assigned as oral presentations. And so even if we don't we don't meet synchronous, in a synchronous fashion from time to time, then the class still exists for the oral presentations posted by the students when they report using video recording. Then we have the cultural heritage documentation of narratives. That is the only formal paper I have, because when you have the introduction, the presentation of data as presentation of stories, you also have the analysis, you have the evaluation, conclusion. Then there is a creative group work. It's the choice of the students, which they can have. I will be inviting you for this to make it UP system-wide, if that's possible. And then there is a artistic work, 20%. That is their own work, which is, for me, the balancing factor, where they can use their imagination, their own creativity, their whatever artistic work they can think of. If they want to write poems, they want to paint, whatever they have, they can present in a creative artistic fashion. That's it. And then lastly, you have this is a suggestion for an inter-unit creative group project that we can have a blog for or on. We can blog on this if you want to join us. Since we are starting from the point of view of the Austronesian ancestral heritage of the Philippines. No one can question that. And our languages are actually one. Instead of focusing on the differences, we can focus on the similarities. And all languages in the Philippines are Austronesian. And so it's suggested that there is to look for our cultural heritage pertaining to the water goddess. So since we are an archipelago, we have one, I think, and it's good to discover if you still don't have. And so that can be a basis for our national for our nation building and also for our empowerment. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Grace. That was already a very rich presentation, and Ma'am Grace got carried away a bit, but she was able to probably, from experience, a seasoned flow to present a seasoned flow in the handling of topics, with water as a prominent image, and she was able to tell us about how she was able to input CU relevance, interculturality and interdisciplinarity as well, and unity, in the handling of PhilArts 1. Okay, so we are going to proceed to our second panelists. We remind our panelists to keep it at 5 minutes so that we will have a lot of time for the interactions, also comments and reactions of our participants as well, because this is a conversation and we would like to have their inputs as well. So our second panelists on our topic on fair and compassionate requirements. So during the weekend, Professor Aileen de la Cruz, the assigned panelist from UPLB, had to deal with the asymptomatic COVID case of her mother and swab tests among her family members. We hope and pray for their family's well-being. But we are grateful to a colleague from her department for taking on the panelist task at such short notice. Jeremy Ruel N. de la Cruz is an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He teaches theater art subjects, including theater history, theater communication, acting, directing, children's theater, and community theater. He finished his bachelor's degree in theater arts and master's degree in Philippine Studies, major in Philippine theater at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Okay, please welcome Professor Jeremy Ruel N. de la Cruz.
Magandang umaga po. Sana naririnig niyo po ako. Okay, thumbs up lang po tayo kung naririnig po tayo. So ako po ang talagang sumalo kay Ma'am Aileen de la Cruz, aking colleague sa aming departamento sa UP Los Baños, sa Departamento ng Humanidades. At narito po ako ngayon. Magandang umaga po sa mga ating colleagues ngayon na dumalo sa ating PhilArts 1 GE Conversation. At 5 minutes lang daw po yung aking inatasan kasi na oras para i-present yung aming topic. So, i-share ko muna ang aming screen base sa aming topic. Ayan po, sana nakikita po natin. Thumbs up lang po kung nakikita po natin ang ating slide. So, magandang umaga po. Yes po. So, the chosen or assigned topic given to us sa PhilArts 1 sa pagtuturo sa UP Los Baños ay fair and compassionate requirements. So, ika nga dahil wala rin ang aking kasamahan at nasanay ako sa teatro, talaga na kailangan magpatuloy, hindi tayo mawawalan ng presentation. Kaya ika nga, the show must go on ang kailangan natin gawin, sabi ko sa ating kasamahan. So dito sa PhilArts 1, aming topic, okay, so slide yes. So PhilArts 1 course path sa UPLB. So ito naman ang aming naging senaryo, okay, sa aming PhilArts 1 course path sa UPLB. So we have modules and study guides also. And as you can see, there are 7 modules. And out of 12 original modules, okay, we have chosen and decided to use only 7 modules. So it's in my screen, we have 7 modules. And for the requirements, okay, so we have graded, okay, requirements. As you can see, there is labeled here IW. So ang ibig sabihin niyan means individual work for students. And GW for group work. So just to give you some ideas on this requirements for journal entries, these are journals which are assigned for students that they need to answer guide questions based on the readings assigned per module. And for the object of culture naman, it is an object that students must of course present, okay, object that represent their community or Philippine culture. Another one is we have also individual essay, okay, and then we have the report, okay. So sa report naman po ay group work siya. So the group will be assigned a set of materials and report in the following topics. So this includes the module 5 sa aming popular culture. And next one is we have the interview video. So yung interview video ay it's about a local artisan, about the process of its production, yung artwork niya, reception of his consumers about particular or traditional art form. Pwede siyang topic on traditional art, okay, culinary, okay, what else that we've decided, also contemporary art. And next one is the zine article. Zine article for us is just like creating a magazine article. And there are assigned also a chosen topic given to the students. For example, these are the designers, okay, about culinary again, about music also, and siguro yung mga local artists, usually sa Calabarzon kasi marami po kaming mga local artists. So yun yung mga kailangan, mga topics na assigned sa kanila. So there is also what we call the discussion boards. So just to give you a quick meaning of discussion board. In discussion board are questions which are similar to face-to-face classroom recitation. So yun yung mga requirements before na ginawa namin sa course path sa UPLB. Now, we've come up to this. Yes, we encountered challenges last time or last semester. At talaga siguro hindi lang sa aming case dito sa UP Los Baños but all over the CUs and encountered these challenges. First one is, reading and wellness break. Okay, so challenge din siya kasi of course this goes to the part of the faculty also and the students experience yung na-overwhelmed kasi yung faculty and students then dun sa of course requirements ng iba't ibang units. So reading and wellness break is that no submissions. What happened here is no submissions of requirements during this time. There was a need to adjust the study schedule. So there are adjustment of the study schedule na mas nakaplano before. So another challenge is that eto rin, pabigat siya ng pabigat, nagpa-pile up yung challenges, then we encounter these consecutive typhoons. We have Quinta, Rolly, and Ulysses. So this consecutive typhoons has effects on remote learning of students because some hard-hit areas experience power outages and very poor internet connectivity. And last is that until now, this, nagpapatuloy pa rin ito, the anxiety brought about by COVID-19. Yes, and anxiety brought about by COVID-19, this is anxious students cannot perform well in academic tasks. So these are the three challenges that we experienced during the first time that we offered PhilArts 1 last semester. So we come up with a fast solution. Okay, so yung solution na ito is talagang we have to meet with my colleague, Ma'am Aileen de la Cruz, to really discuss on the possible solutions, an adjustment, and those students encountering low yung internet connectivity at the same time yung sa pandemic na COVID-19. So we calibrated the requirements of our course kasi 7 modules pa rin siya pero we adjusted, and actually we lighten up. We binawasan namin, saka mas pinagaan yung mga requirements. So we need to exercise utmost leniency, understanding, and compassion to our students in this time of pandemic. So yun yung isa sa mga pinag-isipan natin na kailangan namin i-execute. So i-execute sa mga estudyante na enrolled sa PhilArts 1. And not only this, but also other GE subjects then. So how are requirements calibrated? So these are just a few, that we did. So those journal entries and some required readings for modules 5 and 7, we removed. So binawasan na namin o tinanggal namin yung mga journal entries na every modules kailangan sagutan ng mga estudyante base sa mga readings. Another one is that the mechanics for the interview video were simplified. So we all just accept raw Zoom interview video without the need to edit because it will take a lot of time for them and effort to really, of course, edit videos. So it's usually if they interview local artists, so kailangan pa ng time. So we already accepted those raw na videos as long as the content was there. Yung mga guide questions sila about their artists and their insights was there in the video. And instead, number 3 is instead of having synchronous meeting for the report, we also have group report. Students were just asked to submit PowerPoint presentations based on the report, assigned report given to them. Kasi talagang hindi na po dahil karamihan sa mga estudyante namin ay naapektuhan ng typhoon. So talagang nahirapan po talaga makakuha ng connectivity. Although, or fortunately kasi sa aking klase ay talagang merong connectivity yung mga estudyante ko. Pero yun nga, hindi naman accidentally, hindi naman sinasadya talaga. So nagbabagyo, so hindi na nila nakayanan pa na talagang agad-agad makapag-connect sa kanilang mga karon ng internet. So number 4 is those interview videos and magazine or zine article were submitted on January 2021 to give students enough time to prepare. So nagkaroon ng break, so we adjust, we gave enough time for the students to really work on, prepare for their interview videos and zine article, which are already, those are the final group output. So fortunately, nakapag-submit yung mga group works naman, because of that extension, ng submission until January 2021. And lastly, those previously ungraded discussion board answers were given points. So dati yung mga parang kailangan lang sagutan, parang chat box lang, post lang about the question and they need to answer it, binigyan na namin ng puntos para at least yung mga estudyante ay makahabol pa rin, ma-meet yung mga makapasa kahit paano dun sa requirements for PhilArts 1. So those are, I think, the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, things that we did to really calibrate for yung para ma-simplify yung PhilArts 1 based dun sa mga requirements or original requirements. So, maiksi lang yung aking presentasyon. Yon at yun po, maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Sir Jeremy.
Opo.
Hindi siya masyadong maigsi po. Pero sige na lang po. We were able to pick up probably similar requirements and challenges and solutions from your presentation. And so we are now going to have our third topic. And we start with the poll that will open shortly. How often do you have synchronous sessions? So our topic is on synchronous conduct of synchronous and asynchronous sessions. All right, so Professor Julie Prescott is an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines, Visayas, where she teaches literature, communications, and various film, arts, and GE courses. She is also the current director of UPV's Information and Publications Office and is an experienced debater and public speaker. She obtained her bachelor's degree in literature from the University of the Philippines, Visayas in 2008, and completed her master's degree in contemporary literature and film at Manchester Metropolitan University in 2016. Okay, please welcome Professor Julie Prescott.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ma'am Oveta. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone just give me a thumbs up if you can see it and if you can hear me, please? All right, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so let me just go ahead and dive right into it. I've been tasked to talk about synchronous versus asynchronous teaching and learning within the PhilArts subject. Of course, when I came up with this whole presentation, it's just a quick run through of how I kind of tackled this particular course in order to kind of realize which of these two was most effective for myself. I first thought of trying to understand the nature of Philippine arts as a GE course. I mean, it's quite complex. There's a lot of different subjects. There's a lot of different areas that could be added and taken away. And of course, there are also critical aspects to the course that need to be discussed. Having said that, this is when I dived into the idea of whether I should do either or for my particular course. Of course, with regards to this particular subject, I thought that I actually have taught PhilArts pre-pandemic, and of course I have been teaching it during the pandemic, and it's two very different experiences. But what I tried to think about when I decided or when I tried to apply both, I have tried to apply both, was what kind of students do I have, or what kind of students do teachers have? Are these students that you have self-starters or social butterflies? Are they the kind of people that professional help? Does it help them if they have professional oversight, or does it simply cramp their style? So these are some of the questions that I actually asked when I started considering how to teach my students when it changed into the pandemic and we had to do remote learning. Okay. So when I thought about that, because of course I had students before that I already knew, in which case it was quite easy to answer those questions. But then I also got assigned first-year students that I'd never met before, and therefore it became far more difficult to answer them. So I went through trial and error. I tried both, and I just want to present as I guess best practices what the different versions or what the positives, pros and cons are of teaching them. So first, what are the advantages of synchronous learning? So for synchronous learning, one of them is classroom engagement. It's great for students who like active discussions and immediate feedback and personal interactions with their classmates. Now, a lot of my students at the beginning, because I taught PhilArts right from the onset of shifting to online learning, that they found it easier to transition from face-to-face to the online setting because they had the option to still see their teacher and interact with some of their classmates. And for many, the live discussions and interactions with their classmates offered them, personal engagement that was or sort of an alternative to what you had in the classroom, but still at least from the comforts of home. Second is dynamic learning. So synchronous classes allow for more dynamic exploration of topics and concepts, I have found, because things like video conferencing made it possible for them to ask questions and receive answers mid-lesson. And they also were able to research on the side on their computers or devices without disrupting the class. These are some of the feedbacks that I got from my students. So for the kind of students that I had who enjoyed being, fast-paced and being surrounded by classmates and people, they found that, it suited them well. Another one is instructional depth. So personally, synchronous online learning allowed me to interact fairly regularly with my students. This made me feel like I could get to know them. This was crucial for me, especially now in the pandemic, where all I see are profile pictures, or all I get are submissions with names. I don't really feel like I get to know my students. On the flip side, for students, it provided regular opportunities for real-time discussion, individual guidance for myself, and mentorship for me, and of course from their classmates. And some of my students said that they did their best work in my class because they had access to supported instruction that synchronous learning gave them. But of course, on the flip side, there are also disadvantages to synchronous learning. So one is a rigid schedule. So of course, unavoidably, with the shift to online, teachers and students both grapple with the difficulties, and they have things like multiple deadlines, unforeseen setbacks. Some of them were already mentioned by our previous speaker, online fatigue, and many other factors that could contribute to difficulty in trying to maintain attendance for synchronous classes. So for students who actually do require flexibility, having to adapt to synchronous learning and that kind of schedule defeated the purpose of their particular objectives. Of course, another one is technical difficulties. We are no strangers to these. I am not, and I'm sure none of us are. So the constant search for wireless signal from remote areas, these are from some of my students who had limited access, was difficult, and it became stressful for them. They said when they had to log on for video conferences, lectures, or even exams. Now, for synchronous learners, technical difficulties like power interruptions, spotty internet, crashing devices, and dying batteries are full-fledged disasters. So instead of logging on, they become stressed, and it becomes a difficult part of what they have to do. Going on to the flip side, so we have asynchronous. So what are the advantages of asynchronous learning? So based on what I have practiced within the last 2 semesters, one of the advantages is flexibility. When I set up my class using asynchronous learning, I think we all did this, of course, I made the course facts freely available to all students so that they could access this whenever it best suited them for their schedule. And for some, they preferred working at night and not specifically at the assigned times the classes were supposed to be, because their home setup was different and it worked for them. So some of my students said they preferred this because they were given the materials that they could complete at their own pace and at their own convenience. Another part of this, which is kind of a run-on to flexibility, is pacing. I find that some of my students find it most empowering that because asynchronous learning offers them to work at their own pace, but of course within set deadlines still. But there is an element of adjustability there. They can read and review materials as much as they need to, completing them based on their own understanding rather than when the class ends on time, if you were doing synchronous. Now, some quick learners I found power through materials really quickly and do their submissions really fast. Others I found take time to absorb and, revisit them. And this kind of learning caters to both. And of course, we cannot deny the fact affordability. Data is expensive, and asynchronous classes allow you to work offline at minimal cost. I don't think I need to expound on that. Unlike video conferencing, it uses a lot of data and it's far more expensive. But of course, there are still disadvantages even to asynchronous learning. One is isolation. Some students express their preference for the personal touch, and they said that they felt like they did better when people were actually listening, and that although there was social media and there was email to substitute for real-time learning, they felt that it didn't quite really cover that, and therefore it became still quite difficult for them, and they still preferred it was an issue. And then last but not the least, risk of apathy. While working with in self-guided environments, we're trying to forward this, and we're saying they need to be more independent independent, the students, it can be empowering, and it is an important thing that they must learn. It's also important, I think, for us to try and recognize being realistic. Some students simply do not have the drive to keep themselves on track and committed to their goals. Many struggle to remain enthusiastic about the subject matter without constant support and evaluation from their professors or instructors. And the reality is that some students do best with clearly stated expectations, immediate feedback, constant, having the constant watchful eye, and the free form of asynchronous learning simply demotivates them. Okay, so beginning with these ideas, I just thought about how I could bridge the gap. This is nothing groundbreaking. A lot of us have adapted this. But for me personally, after consultations, I weighed my options and I came up with a solution of blended learning. I employed both options, essentially. I found they were both useful and that I used them both. I created a course pack with complete modules and learning resources and activities that could be completed with or without the students having to attend my synchronous lectures. But on the same side, at the same time, I held synchronous classes as supplementary learning once every 2 weeks, adjusting as necessary with whatever things come up. None of these classes I made mandatory. They were only supplemental, and all sessions were recorded and uploaded to a Google Drive for ease of access for those who later might want to rewatch it. And that's it, really. So I'll end there. I think the key to making something work according to best practices, according to what worked for me, is that communication. Basically, communicate with your students, tell them your difficulties, they'll tell you yours, and I think that it's an important key to success. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Prescott. We are now going to have, for the advantages, disadvantages of asynchronous and synchronous learning. So some of the participants here might disagree or agree with some of the things that you mentioned. Okay, and then finally, we are going to have our last sharer on some interdisciplinary approaches. We are going to open the poll for this on asking the participants what are some of the interdisciplinary approaches in the teaching of PhilArts 1. So our panelist is Gerardo O. Lucena, is an assistant professor in the Department of Art Studies, College of Arts and Letters of UP Diliman, where he also obtained an MA in Art History. He also has a diploma in Museum Studies from Meiji Gakuin University, Japan. His areas of specialization include photography, new media art studies, and curatorial work. He was formerly the director of the Diliman Housing Office and curator of the Vargas Museum. Please welcome Professor Gerardo O. Lucena.
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to apologize because earlier this morning I made a short PowerPoint presentation. Kaya lang, nagkakaproblema ko technical difficulties with this gadget. Any rate, I'll continue with my sharing for this morning. So, if everyone can hear me, I'll proceed now, no? So,
is your video on, Sir Jerry? Sorry po. Is your video on?
Hindi din kasi naglalag ako, but naglalag yung gadget eh.
Can we ask the secretariat maybe to flash na lang the title, the convert title, so that you don't see me on the screen, please?
So how do I do it?
Okay,
Yeah, you can continue, sir.
Ma'am Pat, can I continue na lang?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, sige po. Okay, so tawag dito, interdisciplinary approaches in teaching PhilArts 1. So just to give a short context or para sa PhilArts, hindi ako naabutan for PhilArts 1 nung pandemic time because nung second sem natin nung 1920, naputol yung PhilArts ko dahil March tayo nag-lockdown. So by early March, naputol yung classes ko. So basically, yung PhilArts classes ko, hindi ako inabot ng pandemic. So nagturo na ako dati nito. So hindi ko siya naturo sa ating sitwasyon ngayon for this course, specifically for PhilArts 1. Okay, anyway, yung sharing ko for the tawag dito yung interdisciplinary approach. Una, palagi kong tinitignan yung description ng PhilArts 1 kasi yung alignment palagi ang kino-consider ko dito. Kasi PhilArts 1, kung babasahin ko mabilisan lang, yung pinaka-importanting description niya palagi, yung one is to deepen our understanding of the interrelationship of human existence and art practices in Philippine everyday life. The second is yung valuations of art in relation to cultural practices and social processes. And the third one is critically understand the arts and expressive culture. So these are very broad descriptions of PhilArts 1. So ang tanong palagi dito, nung nagtinuro ko to ay, paano mo ilalapat yung interdisciplinary approach? No? Interdisciplinary approach. Now, basically, yung PhilArts tawag dito syllabus, sinunod ko to, guided ako dito. Although ganun din yung modules 5 to 12, selective na yon, okay? Art in Philippine Society. Okay? So paano ba natin tinuturo, no? Nung nagturo ako ng PhilArts 1, so hindi ako inabot ng synchronous ng pandemic pa nung time na yon. Ang pagturo ko nabitin kasi nag-start nung January, middle of January, and then nung March natigil din siya. Yung frameworks, no, paano tuturo yung PhilArts by using interdisciplinary approaches, no? Now, we know for a fact that the study of arts cuts across different disciplines, no? So I'll just cite a few of these interdisciplinary approach that we can use, no? These are different academic areas of study or disciplines para mas maunawaan natin, maintindihan natin yung Philippine art as well as the expressive cultures. Now, naging challenge palagi dito nung nagturo ako nito yung paano ba ina-identify ko palagi yung saan sila nag-i-intersect, saang aspekto yung mga disiplina na ito ay nag-i-intersect o yung commonalities nila. And then tinatanong ko din palagi yung limitasyon. May limitasyon ba ang diskurso sa pagturo, yung approach o framework na gagamitin natin sa pagturo ng PhilArts, considering the general description. Palaging guide ko yon. Okay? So so isa dito sa mga ginamit ko noon ay sociology, no? So ang tanong natin ay paano ba, how can sociology contribute to the understanding of art in general and then Philippine art and culture specifically? Okay, sociology, no, this is a discipline which foreground discourses on social structures, social events, historical narratives para maintindihan natin yung sining, no? Now, dito sa sociological approach, when teaching PhilArts 1, okay, isa sa approach ko dito ay yung pag-identify at pag-define ng community ng sining, or I would use the word the art world, as well as the dynamics of social relationships. Now, I find this very important sa sociology kasi ang application namin ito sa classes ko noon, nilalapat ko ito doon sa art of social practice, pagkain lalo na, okay, fashion, fiesta, social media. So dito pinapasok ko yung learning activity doon sa art in Philippine society. So nilalapat ko na siya doon. Now in this approach, sociology, ginamit ko din dito yung yung societal functioning of aesthetic values. Okay? In this module, aesthetic values are considered and how aesthetic values are acted upon. So para bang in essence, ito yung organization ng art world, but specifically community. Nagfo-focus ako sa community sa Philippine art. Okay? So societal function of aesthetic values. Now, this actually yung pagturo ko yung paggamit ko ng sociology, very, very broad lang ito, no? Kasi kasama dito yung idea of an art world, yung kay George Dickey na institutional approach, and then yung interactional approach, all under the umbrella of sociology. Okay, now susunod, okay, Another interdisciplinary approach na ginamit ko na din yung anthropology, no? Ito ay madalas na pwedeng gamitin sa PhilArts 1 kasi the focus now is on historical, economic, cultural, and aesthetic dimensions outside. Ginagamit ko kasi dito yung sa labas ng sa atin, Philippine art specifically, outside non-Western art forms. So, since there is no single universal and cross-cultural definition of the term art, okay, sa module na ito, we investigate on the formal aspects of or features of in objects which, without exclusively being artistic, they of course possess certain aesthetic qualities. Okay? So dito sa anthropological approach, okay, we also put we emphasize on the importance of the conditions and the social processes in the creation and production of art. Okay? Anthropology, no? So in one of the readings sa essays, yung sa overview ng tawag dito, overview ng PhilArts, pinag-uusapan doon, di ba, yung approaches to understanding culture, anthropology and culture. Emphasis is put on objects, ideas, and practices that are meaningful to a specific society. Okay, so yun, conditions and social processes in the creation and production of art. Okay, so anthropology. Now, another interdisciplinary approach, very common ito, ay of course philosophy. Okay, paano ba natin gagamitin ito? Because basically we know that philosophy deal with the nature of art and of course related concepts, specifically aesthetics. Diba? We know that it's philosophical study of beauty and taste. So, ginamit ito namin sa pag-aral ng PhilArts. Okay? Aesthetic standards. Okay? Ano ba yung parameters na ginagamit natin? Okay? Para mag-evaluate ka ng isang artwork. Okay? How does art appeal to our senses? So, dito pumapasok yung logic and reasoning for analysis. Philosophy. So for learning activities, ang ginamit namin dito, ang ginawa ko pala, meron silang creative work, meron silang insight paper, either or sila dyan. So nilapat ko ito doon sa itong philosophy, this approach sa art as popular culture. Okay? Art as popular culture. Activity on the evaluation of aesthetic standards. So this has to do with ano ba ang lente na ginagamit natin para mag-evaluate ka, no, using the standards, aesthetic standards. So activities dito, ang ginamit yung sa music, puro contemporary, na kunwari sayaw, musika, graffiti, at saka pang-apat dito yung new media art kasi ginagamit namin ito palagi sa, lalo na ngayon, yung aesthetics ng new media art. Ginamit namin yan. Okay. Yung susunod, ito yung isa pang very common na ginamit ko dito, linguistics, no? Kasi alam naman natin na ang sining ay isang diskurso, it's a signifying practice too. And palagi dito na pag-uusapan sa linguistics yung process of meaning making. Okay? So, we understand art by focusing on the language, no? Now ako, guided ako dito ng yung tawag dito yung may kay Ma'am Guillermo's essays on reading images. So this kasama dito yung semiotics and then semantics. So yeah, and then ang learning activities ko lang naman dito. So ito yung panghuli, yung art as politics. So nilalapat ko dito doon sa module na art as politics. So ang ginagamit namin dito yung film and visual arts. Okay, pag-analyze ng mga gantong art forms. Okay, so yeah, basically yun lang naman, ano, I think yun ang pinaka-importante lang na kumbaga highlights ko, no, sa pagturo ng PhilArts. Tumigil ako doon sa semiotics and semantics. Okay, and then I think that's it. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, salamat din po, Sir Jerry. Tapos, so, the interdisciplinary approaches, no, on sociology, anthropology, philosophy, and linguistics, no. So maybe some are using this, or some may add to this later on. It seems that we have heard much from our panelists already. So we would like to encourage our participants to please, no, contribute, no, to the conversation. So the questions, we have the GS staff have given us instructions on posing questions during the session. Prior to this, we also received questions during the registration. What we will do is try to alternate reading from them. For this to be a conversation, the questions are not necessarily directed only to the panelists. So we can use the reaction buttons, not to raise a hand, so that we will be able to acknowledge you, no? So you may then unmute with or without your video for your comments and insights on the discussion. Okay, so we would like to start, no, from the questions that we received during the registration. There was a general question that was posted by Sir Kelvin Meneses of UP Los Baños. Paano po itinuturo ang PhilArts sa panahon ng pandaigdigang krisis? So it's a very general question, very general question, and we are going to break that down. So first, on teacher impact, on student impact, and on teaching strategies. Now, on teacher impact, we start off with similar questions from Ma'am Maria Teresa Arejola of UP Los Baños, Ma'am Rojan Hilario of UP Manila, and Sir Christopher Tarka of UP Diliman. What is the most pressing issue or greatest challenge you have encountered to enable effective teaching of this course during the pandemic? Would our panelists or anyone from our participants might like to answer the question? Sir Jeremy, nakikita po kayo sa screen. So is there something you would like to say? This was already covered by your talk, right? No, so so pwedeng merong ibang may dagdag sa sinabi na po ni Sir Jeremy. Kasi if we look at our chat box, mukhang wala, doon sila nag-send ng question ata sa sa form rather than using the chat box. So is there anyone who would like to, aside from the ones which were given by Sir Jeremy, you might also like to check out the results, no, of our poll, no, and if you have questions on that or comments about that, you might also like to share your thoughts, please. Anong greatest challenge natin po? So anybody from the participants?
Hello. Hi, not a participant, pero I think I'd like to answer that question. I think the challenges are multiple on many levels. I don't think there's just one greatest challenge, although personally what I found that challenged me the most, but this is more of a personal thing for me, is that the pandemic and remote learning never really has the same feel in terms of getting to know your students. And I think it's the same. The nuances of, facial expressions, how you interact in class, even though it can be replicated, and I kind of mentioned this in what I said earlier with video conferencing, and it gives you an aspect of that, it's not completely the same. So in terms of there are ways to grade your students as a teacher. So, good answer from a teacher's perspective. There are ways to grade your students based on their outputs, but sometimes it's truly personally, I'm not sure if, even though I have the numbers in terms of scoring their activities, because the interactions, despite having synchronous lessons still in between, it doesn't offer me a full idea of whether the students really appreciate or understand the course as much as what I used to be able to glean from face to face. So I think that for me is one of the challenges. But at the same time, I think there are also, on the flip side, things that this pandemic has also offered that is good. I mean, a lot of what we have done, because we scrabbled our band-aid solutions to begin with, and then we kind of developed them, and it's thrust us forward a long way in terms of adapting to this whole climate and to the whole distance tech, synchronous, asynchronous, and other platforms of learning. But yes, for me, that's one of the biggest challenges, the fact that it still lacks a certain amount of organic discourse between students and teachers. And from the feedback students have given me personally, I think they also feel the same way.
Thank you, Professor Julie. Now, is there a similar question? We refer to the questions that we have gotten from or rather during the session. Is there a similar question on challenges, issues, pressing issues during the pandemic teaching? We would like to refer to our pollsters who are also pitching in as assistant moderators. Is there a similar question?
Yes, Ma'am Oveta. This is Elaine,
Yes.
Ma'am Oveta.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, we have another question here. It's fairly similar to what was just asked. What are the challenges from Ms. Hilario of UP Manila? So it's pretty much the same, no? What are the challenges you encountered in teaching this course during the pandemic? However, we have one question from you. How did you cope with remote technology setup and challenges, naman? But pretty much those are some that are fairly related to each other.
Okay, there is a, thank you, Ms. Elaine.
Yes,
there is a comment from our chat box. Is that they have been, one of the things that the pandemic has enabled, however, is that they have been guided to turn their attention to the artistic life of their immediate communities, which would have gone unnoticed if they were coming to UP campuses every day. No, that's right. Okay, yes. For example, in at UP Visayas, we have this one activity where we ask students to feature a cultural item from their respective communities. Okay, so maybe we can go to another question on student impact. Professor Amihan Ramulete of UP Diliman asks, did students find PhilArts relevant to their personal lives and or courses? Probably this refers to their degree program or their other courses. And a similar question from Ma'am Sofia Guillermo, also of UP Diliman. How does one make the student realize the necessity, if not urgency, of the subject during these challenging times? Does anyone have a comment regarding that? So relevance to them, to their, to themselves, to their lives, personal lives. Do you have any insights? Would you have any insights on that? Maybe we can also hear from the CUs, which are not represented as panelists, maybe from UP Baguio or UP Mindanao.
Ma'am Oveta, there's a response from Ma'am Joanne Bantang in the chat box.
Yes, please. Some of my students felt that they missed out on the university life experience. There is really a sensorial experience as well as experiential learning with a physical setup. Some are an LOA to really experience it. No, I think this was similar to, it's the same case also with the teachers. No, Professor Prescott was saying about this earlier, about the lack of interaction. No, your students are, or some of our panelists also mentioned this about they're just names. They're just names and submissions, but you don't really get to know them as much when you are having in-person interaction. Okay, yes, that's right. Okay, any more comments on that?
Sige, ako na lang since siguro just to add, I mean, when you ask the question, how is it that we can make them realize the importance? I think that it's a really difficult question to answer, considering that each student situation is different. I mean, you know, if there are challenges that they face academically, but being in a home setup also presents a myriad of other challenges that differs from student to student. Some students have easier access to technology, others do not. And therefore, I think as teachers, this is not so much an answer, but this is something that I found personally that I had to strive to do. I had to realize that there isn't a quick and easy cookie cutter blanket solution for all my students. Some students require, you know, that I actually follow them up individually. Some students require that I let them learn at their own pace. Some students like that I make myself available for consultation. And I found that although in the beginning, there was a lot of push towards asynchronous for to sort of cover the blanket situation that, you know, that students are finding it difficult. But I actually found that for me personally, and of course this is after receiving feedback from students, that they found they appreciated the course more when we were able to check in with each other and still have an element of discussion, which was found in synchronous learning, you know, in video conferencing. And I know that some people might say that's unfair. What about the students that don't have access? Yun nga, there isn't a solution siguro that, yung mahirap kasi is there isn't a solution that covers everyone. So we have to realize that there are different situations, but offer as many opportunities as possible. Kung hindi nila kaya mag-attend ng session, then record your sessions and make them available. Or for some, they prefer to pre-record their sessions. Kung merong hindi maka-attend easily sa sessions live, then maybe there's online forums where people can leave comments over a period of 2 or 3 days rather than just one particular time. So in essence, hindi ko naman sinagot directly yung question by saying there's one thing to do, but I think there are multiple things, and we also need to recognize what our strengths are as teachers and what the problems are that the students individually we have in our class have, so that we can learn to mutually adapt to our varying circumstances, siguro.
Yes, okay. Thank you again, Ma'am Julie. There's also a comment that we can read from our chat box, no, to mind the home and everyday life from Ma'am Cecilia de la Paz, one of our module writers, no, for discussion on cultural representations. Another adjustment is to do cultural mapping, you know, from memories rather than field observation. Although this would be challenge. Field mapping, they will have to rely on online resources, no, for this one. Okay, we are going to on teaching strategies. No, we move to another category on teaching strategies. One question from Sir Vicente Horlano, UP Diliman: how do you effectively use virtual synchronous sessions to maximize learning? I think this was already covered by Professor Prescott. You know? So another question from Ma'am Cecilia de la Paz of UP Diliman: to what extent are group works successful in remote teaching during a pandemic? Okay, so perhaps we would like to, as I mentioned earlier, to hear from our colleagues, no, in the other CUs from UP Baguio. I'm sorry, I will have to call out names here. May we hear from Ma'am Erica Jacinto of UP Baguio?
Yes, present. Yeah, good morning po. And the question will be on the
group works.
Group work. During the pre-pandemic, I had group work, but for this online, no group work, because some of our students are actually in different locations. So and during that time when I was designing the modules, I was thinking of like what Sir Robin was saying, the art in their locality. So I want to surface at least some that they visit their OTOP, the one town one product area. So that is what I decided to do, so that they will have their uh, at least no cultural mapping, like what Ma'am Cecile is saying. And another is they have to, part of the module is the recipe video. So some had fun doing it, no, rediscovering their own family's recipes. So for my class, for this pandemic PhilArts, I did not no group work.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. Yes. Thank you po, Ma'am Erica. And then at least no, we heard from from one of our participants. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on group work? Maybe what about from OPOU? No, someone from OPOU. I see the name of Professor Wen Raimundo. OU is they're more adept at distance learning, so perhaps no they're well versed in doing group work. So Professor Raimundo, is there something that you can share with us? Naku, wala atang audio si Ma'am Wen. Or UPOU or UP Mindanao? Kasi po kanina I attended the Arts 1 session, no? So that I will have an idea about how to run the PhilArts 1 session. They asked the participants to rename with a to rename with the CU indicated. So but it seems like we are not able to do it here, so I cannot see who is from which CU. Okay.
There are actually raised hands. I think there's a raised hand.
Yes. Okay. So from Ma'am Arijola. Yes, please.
Sir Pierce, ma'am, is raising his hand.
Oh, Sir Pierce. Okay. Let's have Sir Pierce first and then followed by Ma'am Arijola.
Hello, thank you, Ma'am Oveta. Good morning po. So, nandun po ako sa Arts 1 kanina. I was actually the moderator of that session. And just to be clear, hindi po ako nagtuturo ng Arts 1, saka PhilArts 1. Pero gusto ko lang pong connect yung isang question kanina about the relevance. Kasi na-bring up din po yun kanina sa discussion namin. Ano ba yung relevance or importance ng Arts 1 especially during this difficult time? So I think ito rin kasi yung na-bring up earlier. And it's interesting because sabi nga ng isang panelist namin, well, the general sense was that, you know, pagdating sa arts, whether it's arts in its broad sense or even Philippine arts, wala namang question about its relevance. No? It's already a given. It is relevant. It is essential. Sabi nga ng isang panelist namin, dapat siguro hindi tayo maging parang defensive, no? trying to prove our relevance, no, to our students. But then what I also realized, no, listening in on that conversation, is that I think this is also one of the challenges of being a GE faculty. How do we set up the conditions in our classroom, in our course, in such a way that our students actually, you know, at the end of the day, or hopefully during the semester, they get to realize the importance, because we know it's a process, but you know, it's really a challenge. Now, how do we make them feel, you know, that especially during this pandemic. In fact, there is a lot of opportunity for the arts to help us cope with all of this negative emotions. We're cycling through collective despair, grief, anger, lahat-lahat na. And ang laki ng pwedeng maging contribution ng arts towards this end. So definitely it's relevant, but we probably need to spend some more time thinking about how do we actually make our students realize this particular or the specific importance of the arts. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Pierce. No, as an observer psychologist, no, your input is related to what Dr. Grace earlier talked about, incorporating the idea of arts as healing and using various perspectives from Filipino psychology also. So yes, thank you for highlighting that. And then we also have a comment from Professor Arihola, directly, to address directly to Dr. Grace Devora, and Dr. Grace was able to respond to this as well, in our chat box, about how she was able to use the butya image to unify the coverage of our PhilArts topic. Okay. Group works. That was a question on. We had a question on group works. We have one more question on teaching strategies from UP Diliman, from Sir Roberto Paulino. What practices developed during this period of remote learning do you plan to keep when face-to-face classes resume? I think some of the questions that are being asked today were also asked earlier, similar questions during the Arts 1 session. So I remember that this was one of the questions that was also raised. So perhaps we would like to ask the inputs of our panelists, and then if we have participants who would also like to share their inputs, then we would also like to hear from them as well. So what practices developed during this period of remote learning do you plan to keep when face-to-face classes resume? So let's start with our panelist from UPLB, Sir Jeremy.
Again, yes, those activities that I really want to keep pag nag-start na ulit in face-to-face is, I think, the documentation interview with local artists, because that would be an updated, that is a good scenario for us, especially there are a lot of artists right now that are affected the situation, and they cannot create yung kanilang ginagawa talaga, especially coming from my discipline, which is performing arts. Okay, it's good for us also to interview, document artists on their creative works. Okay, especially how they cope up with this pandemic and after, probably. So that's one thing that I really want to keep in as an activity, okay, in my PhilArts 1 section class. Kasi yun yung importansya na paano nag-develop, paano nag-redefine ulit, ano yung mga apparatus na ginawa ng mga artists, okay? Kasi sa panahon ngayon, nahihirapan talaga yung mga artists ang kanilang sitwasyon. Kaya paano ulit nila papahalagahan yung kanilang gawain, yung kanilang discipline after this pandemic, before and after this. So maganda siguro yung pagpatuloy yon, kasi talagang maraming mga local artists pa rin po talaga na hindi man natin na kukuha o nakatanong, pero sa tingin ko pagbalik ng manormalize, sana po ay talagang babalikan ulit natin kakamustahin. Kasi yun siguro isang relevance din ng pag-aaral ng Philippine arts, pagpapahalaga sa mga inaambag ng kahit man hindi kilala ng mga artists, ay kailangan pa rin natin pagpahalagaan yung mga gumagawa ng sine. So yun lang.
Okay, salamat po, Sir Jeremy. There is a response also from our chat box na submitting from Sir Alvaro Calara. Submitting outputs online will be a good practice, cutting down on paper use to give some breather to the trees. I second the motion, although problem that cropped up during the pandemic is instead of paper, no, we have the disposable face masks and what they call this, the health protocols, no, have also added, no, to the burden of trash littering. Okay. Also, we would like to ask somebody will alternate between among our panelists siguro. Professor Robin Rivero, is it? Robin Rivera, sorry. Is Professor Robin Rivera still here? Sir Robin, parang volunteer po kayo for some insights. Okay, while Professor Rivera is gathering his thoughts, maybe we can hear from si Sir Jerry of UP Diliman.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you po. Ma'am, can you hear me, Ma'am Oveta?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay. Sa tanong kanina ni Professor Robert Paulino, I think isa sa pinaka-importanteng tandaan natin for PhilArts 1 is yung the dynamics of tawag dito yung art practices, Philippine art practices within the context of Philippine everyday life. Kasi I think ito yung nagde-delineate ng PhilArts lalo na sa Arts 1. The dynamics of art practices in Philippine everyday life. Kasi pag lalo na yung cultural mapping, kasi there's art everywhere. Sa bahay pa lang natin na meron na tayong ganong experience. Sa pagkain, maraming bagay. So I think ito yung sa tingin ko pag bumalik na tayo doon sa face-to-face meetings, mahalaga na mabigyan natin ng importance talaga yung hanapin natin kung ano yung sining sa paligid lang natin. Kasi sa bahay pa lang natin, meron na, marami na. So ako nung nagturo ako nito noon, although hindi umabot pa ng pandemic, marami silang mga creative works, mga nagagawang mga outputs na nakukuha mismo nila sa bahay nila. Lalo na nung kasama dito siguro yung sa social media, Instagram, maraming mga discussions kami dyan. So I think that's it. Art practices in Philippine everyday life, and of course yung cultural mapping. Ang mapping kasi naman, cultural mapping, hindi lang naman pwedeng hindi lang yung buong komunidad, pati na rin sa sariling environment natin pwede natin masimulan yon. Salamat po.
Okay, thank you din po, Sir Jerry. And then it's 12:03. There will still be an afternoon session later on another GE course. Maybe as a last input or nearly the last input, we have some comments and interest on the sharing of Dr. Grace Devora earlier on the mutya. Okay, so perhaps Ma'am Grace would like to say something about it.
The importance of the mutya, ganon.
Yes, ma'am.
I can share kasi I also have this Zoom link. I will be introduced. To music. I am not good in the technical part. I just read Elena Merano's discussion on the song, but we have an ethnomusicologist in our department, and she will tackle the musical part of the Mutya ng Pasig and its relation to the Kumintang and to the art song Kundiman. But I will discuss specifically the image of the singing woman, in the weeping and singing woman in the middle of the night, because that's one broad topic in its the mutya is so broad, so I will use that to discuss, and she can really be the lost diwata, the lost, she has so many the lost the lost hero or folk hero or heroine of the Tagalog region, which is connected also with Southeast Asia, Cambodia, because I looked at the different legends of the origin of these countries. It really has something to do with water. So, but in this particular lecture, we will just focus on this motif of the singing woman, because it's related to the kumintang and to the kundiman and to the song. And then the technical part, as I mentioned earlier, will be discussed by Juliet Bien. So, and then from there, probably we'll explore it more, so that other faculty members can also use it if they want. If they can experiment or just explore on how this can be done in class.
Okay, thank you po, Ma'am Grace. Just for the information of everyone, the poll that we had earlier, if you were able to view the results, poll 1 on the most important topics, what came out was on top, art as cultural heritage, followed by art as social practice and politics, and art as popular culture. So just a slight difference in the percentages. Poll 2 on tasks that we give our students. So we had on top reflection papers, followed by assignments and projects. And then, so not much on quizzes or even a final paper. And then we had a third poll on the conduct of synchronous sessions. So most had once a week, followed by every other week, or rather once every 2 weeks. So those are the results of our poll earlier. And then for our final questions, one final question. We have one from Professor Kimuel Gabriel, and perhaps anybody would like to answer this. Babasahin ko lang po yung sa chat box. Perhaps magandang itanong din kung paano pumapasok ang sining sa usapin ng relasyong pangkasarian sa loob ng tahanan at komunidad. So gender, gender. How does gender play a role in the idea of arts? Would anyone from our participants or panelists like to share their input on this? May magbo-volunteer po ba, or kasarian, gender? Meron ba na sa dami nating iniisip kung paano to conduct the class, na nai-input pa ba natin ito?
I can share.
Yes, ma'am. Please.
At the risk of saying that I have the mucha has a say in everything, at the risk of that, but I can really say that the mucha can be the feminine principle. But what is the feminine principle? Because most of the mucha are presented as a female, but then I've seen that it's not just female, it's more of an energy of consciousness, the feminine aspect. So magandang pag-aralan ito kasi is it really has it really something to do with the physical, biology, or is it gender, or what is it? For me, it appears that it's some kind of a consciousness. But anyway, that can be explored kasi papasok dun na yung ano ba yung may politics involved ba yun? Kasi I think mas embracive siya kasi yung concept, nire-relate ko siya sa concept ng bai, that actually bai is you can make it male and female. So there is a balancing aspect that you have the two principles within you, like yin and yang, but then you can choose to focus on one aspect and the other aspect, but the ideal is you you can balance it, the balancing aspect. But then that is more philosophy. That's more spirituality. But the focus is really the union. So parang the mucha can contribute, tingin ko, as a form of consciousness that is open to the union of the two. It's not really conflicting na duality. What is back na competition? It is really a balancing of the principles that are already in you. So ganon. Yun lang. I can stop there, but you can actually study it more.
Yes.
More.
Sige, thank you po, Ma'am Grace. Meron pong may comments na of agreement din po doon sa ating chat box, no? So final na lang po ito, no? Professor Cecilia de la Paz, maybe you would like to share your insight, no, about the imaging of the Filipino in the pandemic, sampo pasaway, bayanihan in community pantries, etc., which are cultural issues. No, which reminds me, earlier in the presentation of Dr. Devora, she mentioned about ginhawang bayan, no? Ginhawang bayan, and then it occurred to me, no, it's interesting or significant, though, that the community pantries started in a street called Maginhawa Street. So, Professor De La Paz, would you like to say something, please? Final.
Okay, magandang tanghali po sa inyo lahat. Sorry po, hindi ko lang ma-on yung video. Pero I'm grateful for those mga speakers na nagsalita ngayon, na nakakabuhay siya. But siguro ang reflection ko lang would be, yung design of the PhilArts one was done, of course, pre-pandemic. And it imagined really a student, interacting with the community, interacting with artists, and getting a feel and sense of the Philippine arts and culture in your locality, right? But even with that, in the pandemic, we have restrictions, of course, of the students that they cannot freely go outside their home. So I think the first point is really to mind what is in the home, but not just to romanticize what's in the home, but interrogate also. No? Sabi nga ni Ma'am Gabriel, baka mayroong gendered issues, no, sa loob ng bahay. And the souvenir items, for example, that is bought by the parents and the students, no, pero hindi properly read, no, for example, a pinalak na just hanging in the wall. Baka doon pwede magsimula talaga yung estudyante. But the second point is, even if we cannot go outside, lalo na yung mga estudyante, there are, of course, images that's floating around. And, you have government officials floating dangerous words like pasaway, red tagging, etc., which are all culturally rooted then and politically rooted then. No? So we must not be afraid to talk about this push of cultural misrepresentations, and confront it, because it's a kind of our responsibility to also to update the PhilArts modules, and the specific topics niya to be relevant to the pandemic. I think ako kasi ngayon ko lang tinuturo siya online first time, so I'm still in the exploratory experimental stage, pero parang I'm now beginning to see that some topics needs to be updated moving forward, yung idea of yung futures natin beyond the pandemic and what needs to be done will be vastly different, I think. So I would encourage everyone to create new modules talaga in the future para maka-adapt din talaga yung ating PhilArts topic. Maraming salamat.
Yes, thank you po, Professor De La Paz. Noong when we started, we were really scrambling to come up with a course pack that we can offer during the semester. So even teaching it the second time around, you're still grappling with how to do the remote learning. So maraming salamat po for that input. All right, so at this point, we are going to have last Dr. Arindo, pero before that, we would like to do some acknowledgements po to our GE TWG sila Dr. Evangeline Amor and the staff, Danica Valdez, Rica Santos, Steph Lacbayo, and our panelists, Dr. Grace Odal-Devora, Professor Jeremy Ruel de la Cruz, Professor Julie Prescott, and Professor Gerardo Lucena. And then our pollsters and assistant moderators, Professor Susan Mila P. Alvarez de Salem and Miss Elaine L. Monserrate, and all the participants for making this truly a PhilArts One conversation. And Ma'am Pat, do we do the photo op first before the certificates?
Okay. Actually, the certificates now, and then the photo op. Just
All right.
Steph, if you can just flash the certificate. I'm pitching in for Ma'am Banji, who has to attend to another event simultaneously. So yeah, that's one of the banes of this technology, where we are expected to bilocate. But I wanted to thank so Steph, what happened to the certificate? I wanted to thank, on behalf of the TWG, our moderator. Something happened. Okay. Biglang lumiit ang pangalan ni Ma'am Oveta. So I want to thank our moderator, Professor Mary Oveta Villareal of UPV for moderating, and then our co-moderator, Professor Susan Mila Alvarez de Salem, also of UP Visayas. And Ma'am Elaine Monserrate, also all of UP Visayas. Our panelists, thank you so much for your live presentation. It is a bit challenging, as you may have noticed, which is why in the other sessions they opted to pre-record. But we are grateful for your presence and for the points made. Professor Julie Prescott of UP Visayas, Professor Gerardo Lucena of UP Diliman, Professor Jeremy de la Cruz, and Professor Grace Odal-Devora, UP Manila. Professor Jeremy is from Los Baños?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Okay, yes, sorry. So thank you very much. And to all of you, thank you for participating. Can we have a little bit of a photo op, maybe? If you can turn on your videos for a brief moment. Otherwise, just your profile picture. Some of us can't turn on because of connectivity issues, I think. So Steph, can you tell us para we will not be...
Yes po. Ayan. So 1, 2, 3. 2 more. 1, 2, 3. Last. 1, 2, 3. There. Thank you po.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. We have a third session today at 1:30, I think. And then that's Wika Isa. And then tomorrow we have 3 sessions. So see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good day and stay safe lahat po.
Thank you. Bye.
So much. Salamat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ay nagtuturo ng mga kursong Introduction to Linguistics 1 and 2, Wika Isa, at Language and Culture sa UP Mindanao. Nagtapos siya ng MA Linguistics sa UP Diliman. Ang ilang pananaliksik niya sa linguistika at relasyon ng wika at kultura ay mababasa sa Social Science Diliman, the Cordillera Review at Philippine Social Sciences Review. Na-organisa siya noong 2018 at 2019 ng mga grammar workshop at sa mga wika ng Mindanao na dinaluhan ng mga guro mula sa DepEd. Ang mga workshop ay naglalayong makatulong sa kanilang pagtuturo sa konteksto ng MTB, MLE. Tatalakayin naman ni Professor F. Mer Agustin at Professor Joey Peregrino ang mga hamon at oportunidad na kinakaharap sa pagtuturo ng Wika Isa. Ilalatag ni Professor Agustin ang karanasang pangwika ng UP Tacloban sa harap ng kursong Wika Isa. Si F. Mer Agustin ay isang alumnus ng UPV Tacloban sa BA Communication Arts at nagtapos ng Masters sa Comparative Literature sa UP Diliman. Si Ginoong Agustin ang siyang humawak sa mga klase ng wika isa ng UP Tacloban. Simula ng ilunsad ito noong unang semestre sa akademikong taon 2018-2019 at sa loob ng 2 taon, siya ang nag-iisang guro sa wika isa sa nasabing campus. Maglalatag ng 10 tanong naman ang ating huling panel member. Ang mga tanong na ito ay sumasapol sa ating karanasan sa pagtuturo ng wika isa sa gitna ng pandemya. Siya ay si Professor Jovi Peregrino. Si Dr. Jovi Peregrino ay full professor sa Departamento ng Filipino at Pantikan ng Pilipinas, Kolehiyo ng Arte at Literatura sa UP Diliman. Kasalukuyan siyang tagapag-ugnay ng larangan ng wika ng nabanggit na opisina. Nagtuturo siya ng Phil 40 sa loob ng mahabang panahon at naging visiting professor sa Busan University of Foreign Studies sa Busan City, South Korea upang simulan ang pagbubuo ng kurso sa wika at kulturang Pilipino. Mga kapwa ko guro, sabay-sabay po tayong matuto at magmuni at makinig sa kanilang presentasyon.
Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Muli ako po si Jason Petras ng UP Open University na naitalagang magtalakay sa saysay ng wika isa bilang GE. Gaya ng nabanggit sa pagpapakilala, ako po ay nagtuturo kapwa sa UP Diliman at UP-OU. Ngunit sa pagkakataong ito, ang akin pong kinakatawan ay ang UP-OU. At dahil dito, higit na bibigyang tuon ko sa aking pagtalakay ang halaga ng wika isa sa pagtuturo sa at pagkatuto ng mga mag-aaral sa UP Open University. Upang makita natin ang saysay ng wika isa sa UP-OU, mahalagang isa konteksto muna ang pagtuturo sa aming unit. Isang required na kurso ang wika isa sa UP-OU at sa mga GE na kagaya nito, malalaki ang bilang ng mga estudyante. Sa 3 beses ng pagtuturo ko nito, hindi bumababa sa 200 estudyante ang kumukuha ng kurso. Maaring nakakagulat ito sa marami, pero sa kabatiran ng lahat, iba ang galaw sa UP-OU. Ako bilang faculty in charge ay maaaring kumuha ng iba pang guro na maaaring gumabay sa mga estudyante. At ang tawag po namin sa kanila ay ang tutor. Sa kaso ng wika isa, ang partikular na naging kampanya ng aking mga tutor ay magbigay ng takdang aralin at magwasto nito. Pangalawa, ang kumukuha ng wika isa ay mga estudyante sa 3 di-graduadong programa ng UP-OU. Ang Associate in Arts, Bachelor of Education Studies at Bachelor of Arts in Multimedia Studies. Sa kalikasan ng mga programang ito, may hiwatigan na tanging ang wika isa ang kanilang klase na naipapadaloy sa wikang Filipino. Gayun din, trimestral ang paghahati ng akademikong taon para sa di-graduadong antas sa UP-OU. Ibig sabihin nito, bago pa man ang pandemya ay 12 linggo na talaga ang itinatagal ng aming kurso. Maaring hindi ito nalalayo ngayon sa kalagayan ng iba pang unit dahil sa naging pagsasaayos sa mga akademikong taon dulot na nga ng ating sitwasyon. Litaw na litaw rin ang diversidad ng mga mag-aaral sa UP-OU. May mga estudyante na kagaya sa ibang unit na nagmumula sa senior high school, pero marami din kaming mga mag-aaral na nagbabalik eskwelahan mula sa matagal na pagkakahinto. Kaugnay nito, bukod sa pag-aaral, sila rin ay mga empleyado, o maaaring mga empleyado at maaaring mga magulang. Iba-iba rin ang lugar na kanilang pinagmumulan, hindi lamang sa Pilipinas, kundi maging sa iba pang panig ng mundo. So sa kaso ng UP-OU, may mga estudyante kami mula nitong nakaraan, may mga estudyante ako mula sa Europa, mayroong mga nasa gitnang silangan at iba pang lugar sa daigdig. Maaring sa isang punto, ang bentahan namin sa UP-OU ay ang kahandaan na ng aming mga mag-aaral sa sistemang tinatawag na Open Distance E-Learning o ODEL. Kaya wala nang gaanong culture shock sa sistemang ito. Marunong na kumbaga yung mga estudyante, may kahandaan na sila rito. Gayunman, may komplikasyong hatid pa rin ang pandemya at apektado rin sila nito At kung gayon, mahalagang maisaalang-alang ito sa pagdidisenyo ng kurso. Kaya sa 3 beses kung itinuturo ang wika isa sa UPOU, ay palagian pa rin yung pagsasaayos nito. Mula sa pagsasakonteksto ng kursong wika isa sa UPOU, ano ang masasabi nating saysay o halaga nito bilang GE? May isusuma natin ito sa 3. Una, pagsusuri sa sariling karanasan, kadikit ang mga usaping pangwika, pangkultura at panlipunan. May uugnay ito sa disenyo ng GE sa ating universidad na mapalawak ang intelektual at kultural na mga pananaw at mahasa ang kritikal at malikhaing pag-iisip. Malaki ang maniobra sa wika isa at madaling maiangkop sa karanasang personal at panlipunan. Halimbawa, sa usapin ng wika at kultura at intelektualisasyon ng wikang Filipino, mayamang bukal ng diskusyon ng kani-kanyang wika at komunidad na kinabibilangan ng mga estudyante. Kumbaga, hindi nila kailangang lumayo, no? Nandun na sa kanila mismong karanasan yung mga kaalaman na ito na maiaambag nila sa klase. Gayon din sa panahong ito ng pandemya, mayaangkla sa mga paksain ng wika isa ang usapin ng access sa impormasyon hinggil sa COVID-19 sang-ayon sa wikang ginagamit, no, at kung paano ring nawawalan ng access yung mga tao dahil sa paggamit ng wikang hindi nila nababatid. Dagdag pa ang usapan hinggil sa kapangyarihan ng wika, halimbawa yung politika ng pamamansag, yung pagbabansag sa mga tao na pasaway, no? Sino ba itong kinikilala nating pasaway o paano ito namamanipula yung ganitong klase ng mga pagbabansag. At ganoon din, halimbawa ay pagsusuri sa mensahe ng Pangulo sa kanyang puyatang pagkausap sa mga mamamayan. Pangalawa, kadikit ng nauna ang pag-uugat sa sariling identidad. May uugnay naman ito sa layunin ng GE na mapatatag at ang pagtatalaga sa nasyonalismo at katarungang panlipunan. Nabibigyang puwang sa mga talakayan sa kurso ang pag-uugat at pagsusuri sa sariling identidad bilang Pilipino. Partikular sa kaso ng mga mag-aaral nito na naninirahan sa labas ng bansa, nagiging pagkakataon ang wika isa na mabalikan ng sariling wika at kultura na mahalagang sangkap sa pagkilala at pagpapakilala ng sarili. Pangatlo, dahil ito ang nag-iisang kurso sa wikang Filipino ng mga mag-aaral ng UPOU, nagiging pagkakataon din ang wika isa na linangin ang kanilang kasanayan sa pambansang wika. Higit nilang nauunawaan ang halaga ng paggamit ng Filipino sa kanilang mga programa at propesyon, at sila bilang mga Pilipino ay may maiaambag sa pagpapalakas nito sa larangan ng edukasyon, media at negosyo sa partikular. Na babasag din namin yung mga maling pamamalagay sa wika, no, na yung halimbawa yung pagiging purista ng wika na nagbibigay sa kanila ng agam-agam na gamitin ito. At dahil dito nagiging mas maluwag yung paggamit at nakikita nila na meron silang magiging contribution sa paggamit, no, at pagpapaunlad pa ng wikang Filipino. May lalapat ito sa disenyo ng ating GE kaugnay ng pagpapaunlad sa pagkatuto at pagtuklas ng karunungan. Sa kabuuan, litaw na litaw ang saysay ng wika isa, lalo't higit sa panahon ngayon ng krisis, kung saan ang wika ay mahalagang kasangkapan ng ating ugnayan at lunan ng ating karanasan at pagsusuri ng lipunan. Nag-aambag ito sa pagiging tao at pagkatao ng isang mag-aaral, anuman ang kanyang programang kinabibilangan at estadong panlipunan at saan man sa mundo siya naroon. Yun lamang po ang aking maibabahagi at marami pong salamat sa inyong pakikinig.
Magandang hapon. Ito ang mga ilang ginagawa ko sa kursong Wika Isa sa UP Mindanao. sinisimulan ko ang kurso sa pagtalakay ng sosyolinguistikong pananaw sa wika para mabigyang halaga yung konteksto ng Mindanao. Dahil ang Filipino, malimit ikatlo o ikalawang wika ng mga estudyante. Binibigyang pansin din dito, di ba, yung pagkakaiba at variasyon ng wika, lalo na yung di pantay-pantay na relasyon ng mga wika sa Pilipinas. At sinasama ko din yung konsepto ng agency o sariling pagpapasya sa kung paano natin pwedeng maitaguyod yung ating bansa sa pamamagitan ng wikang pambansa. Sa ilang mga module naman, sinasama ko o dinadagdag yung ilang mga babasahin, gaya ng sa module 1 to 3, yung diskusyon ni Foley sa Standard Languages and Linguistic Engineering. Dito din, sinasama ko yung constitutive theory ng wika ni Herda. Tapos sa module 6 and 7, sinasama ko yung ilang mga sinulat ni Ramon Guillermo, gaya nung exposition, critique, and new directions for pantayong pananaw, at puok at paninindigan. Sa module 8, sinasama ko yung mga ginawa ni Sir Ricky Nolasco, gaya nung papel niya na nagsasabing ang mga mismong katagang pamilang ng mga wika sa Pilipinas ay may nakalakip na mga konseptong mathematical, gaya ng arithmetic. Sa assessment naman, napofocus kami doon sa intelektualisasyon at popularisasyon ng Filipino. Ang mga estudyante nagsusulat ng maikling sanaysay ng isang konsepto o metodo o punto mula sa kanilang inaaral na disiplina. Nilalagay namin ito sa isang course blog para mabasa ng nakakarami. Sa class management, may asynchronous at asynchronous. Sa synchronous, yung mga estudyante ang nangunguna sa diskusyon, nagtatanong o nagkokomento, at tinatalakay yung mga mahahalagang mga punto ng module. Sa mga hindi makakadalo, nagsusulat sila ng reflection paper. So, yun lang muna siguro. Maraming salamat.
Ba't laging ganito to?
Maupay adlaw sa iyong tanan. Totoo ngang napakaraming hamon sa pagtuturo sa panahon ng pandemya. Pero para maiba ng kaunti, ay susubukan kong talakayin ng isang napakalaking hamon sa pagtuturo ng wika isa na nariyan na kahit bago pa nitong COVID. At ito ay ang hamon sa pagtuturo mismo ng asignaturang wika isa. Dito pumapasok ang mga issue sa wika sa bansa na bagamat nakaiilang pag-usapan minsan ay mahalagang bigyang pansin pa rin. Medyo nabanggit naman ito sa unang bahagi ng subject pero masasabing pahapyaw lamang ang usapan at pangkalahatan ng dulog. At para sa lokal at mas tutok at tsak na talakayan, ay dapat sigurong isaalang-alang ang konteksto ng mga lokal na pook kung saan itinuturo ang asignaturang ito. Una sa lahat ay sigurong nararapat na banggitin kong ako mismo ay walang problema sa kung anumang wika at may hilig din sa mga wika. Pero para sa akin, dapat bigyang halaga ang konteksto halimbawa ng UP Tacloban, ng silangang Visayas sa pangkalahatan bago at sa tuwing itinuturo ang wika isa sa aming campus. Nakikita kong dapat munang ihanda ang mga estudyante sa panuruan sa Filipino, lalo na kung ihahanay sa usapin ng iba pang mga wika. Halimbawa kasi, base sa obserbasyon, unti-unti nang kinalilimutan ng mga lokal na wika rito, partikular ang Binisaya Leyte Samar o Waray-Waray, at pawang nanagalog na ang karamihan. Sakaling biglang nagfi-Filipino ang UP Tacloban at walang sapat na paghahanda at pagbibigay sa mga mag-aaral ng sapat na kalikuran, may piligrong baka mapag-iwanan nga ang mga lokal na wika. Sa konteksto nga ng UP Tacloban, nung ka na nagturo dito ng asignatura sa Filipino bago ang wika isa, liban na lang sa Filipino 10 at 11 na eksklusibong kahingian ng kursong accounting o pagtutuos. Noon, pawang Inglesa ng UP Tacloban at, ito ay mahalaga, may kalakasan din ang kampanya at paggamit ng mga lokal na wika, lalo ng winaray. Sa mga GE nga noon, lagit-laging nariyan ang Literature 1, na sumasaklaw sa mga lokal na wika at panitikan ng Pilipinas, na madalas ay may espesyal na pagtutok, syempre, sa wika at panitikang Leyte Samar. Kaso, bigla naman itong nawala dahil nga sa mga pagbabago sa sistema ng edukasyon. At kasabay sa pagpanawbaga ng Litwan ay ang biglang pagsulpot naman ng wika isa na itinuturo sa wikang pambansang batay na batay sa wikang Tagalog. Sa ganitong kalikuran, maaaring mapunang natalo o napabaya ng UP Tacloban ang pagsusumikap at mga naabot nito sa pagsusulong ng wikang Winaray at maging ang Cebuano at Abaknon, na salita sa pulo ng kapul sa Hilagang Samar. Kalit na hanaw, down the drain, desaparecido. At kung ganito nga, maaaring masabi ng ilang mga taga rito na tama nga ang desisyon nilang magtagalog na lang kahit mga Bisaya naman at narito lang sa Kabisayaan. UP Tacloban nga ganito ang ginawa. Ito ang nais kong iwasan. Kaya sa pagtuturo ng wika isa, sinusubukan kong ipaalam ang kahalagahan ng wika, lokal, nasyonal, internasyonal. Binibigyan ko ng konteksto sa epektong kahit nag-aaral tayo ng ibang wika, dapat ay panatilihin at tangkilikin pa rin natin ang sariling ating. At sa kabilang banda, kahit na tumututok sa Filipino, ay hindi naman nangangahulugang aayawan na ang Ingles o ano paman. Wala namang problema kung mag-aaral ng sari-saring wika. Mainam nga yung ganon. Dapat lang na maliwanag sa lahat ng pag-aaral ng at sa Filipino, halimbawa, ay hindi nangangahulugang mas iniaangat ito kaysa sa Waray, Cebuano o Ingles, kundi isang pagkakataong maging bihasa at matata sa wikang ito nang hindi naman kinalilimutan ang ibang wikang maaari namang pag-ibayuhin din. Yung pinupunto ko lagi ay na ang pinakamahalaga, mag-aral man ng ibang mga wika hanggat maaari, subukang maging magaling sa lahat ng wikang alam at subukang magsalita sa mga wikang ito ng maayos. Na oo nga't naiintindihan naman ang barok-barok o pinaghalo-halong wika, nananatiling mainam pa rin kung alam natin ang formal at maayos na bersyon ng bawat isa sa kanila. Formal na Waray, formal na Cebuano, formal na Tagalog, formal na Ingles. Sinusubukan kong balansehin ang lahat. Yun ang para sa akin ay mahalaga, ang balanse. Subalit, kung hamon man ang pagtuturo ng wikang isa, itong pagbabalanse sa kabilang banda ay isang oportunidad para sa akin na bigyang diin din ang kahalagahan ng iba pang mga wika, hindi lang ng Filipino. Kaya sa pagtuturo ko ng wika isa, lalo na sa simula ng semestre, ipinapasok ko ang mga paksa sa mga regional na wika, Ingles at maging ng Espanyol. Lalo itong huli kasi bagaman napakahalagang salik ng Espanyol sa kasaysayan, kultura at mga wika ng Pilipinas, ay napakabihirang mapag-usapan nito kung mapag-usapan man sa loob at labas ng mga paaralan sa bansa. Yun ang hamon at oportunidad para sa akin. Ganda mong salamat sa iyong tanan.
Magandang hapon po sa lahat. Tatalakayin ko naman ngayon ang naging karanasan namin sa UPLB sa pagpapaunlad at sa ilang mga inobasyon na ginawa namin sa pagpapaunlad ng course pack. Sa LB, mayroon ilang kaming mga isinasaalang-alang sa pagpapaunlad ng aming mga kagamitan at pamamaraan ng pagtuturo ng wikawan. Una, hindi lahat ng mag-aaral ay may regular na access sa internet at sa mga online platform na ginagamit sa pagtuturo. Pangalawa, ang paradigmatikong pagbabago sa modality ng pagtuturo ay hindi ganoon kadaling isagawa para sa mga guro, lalo na sa skill set na kinakailangan sa bagong modality. At pangatlo, maaaring pasimplehin sa pinakaubod ng layunin ang nilalaman ng wika upang maging mas magaan pareho sa guro at sa mga mag-aaral ang proseso at pagpapalitan ng mga kaalaman. Ito ang mga batayang mga bagay na isinaalang-alang namin sa pagpapaunlad ng isang sentralisadong course pack para sa Wikawan UPLB cluster. Kaya nakabuo po kami ng course pack na para sa online at offline. Sa online, in-upload namin sa Google Classroom ang mga kagamitan sa klase at ito na rin ang naging paraan ng pagpapasa ng mga aktibidad ng mga mag-aaral. Sa offline naman, meron kaming kompletong flexible learning course pack na ipinadala sa mga mag-aaral na nag-request ng printed materials. Sa bawat module, mayroong mga sumusunod na component. Laman ng module, layunin, mga konsepto, at gabay sa pag-aaral. At mayroon ding mga self-test, mayroong mga aktibidad, mga pagninilay, mga babasahin na may nakalagay na oras, ilang mga aktibidad na kayang gawin ng estudyante kahit mag-isa lang siya at kahit limitado ang konsultasyon sa guro. At mga mayor na mga sanaysay katulad ng mga papidsuri. Yan. Sa assessment tools naman, para sa offline course pack, siniguro naming simple lang ang mga aktibidad at hindi masyadong mangangailangan ng konsultasyon kasama ang guro. Dito isinaalang-alang namin ang posibilidad na wala talagang laptop o internet ang mag-aaral. Kaya ang printed modules ay nakadisenyo para sa offline asynchronous learning. Sa online, maliban sa written exercises, may ilang nagpapagawa ng mga vlog, digital poster at online surveys para makapagbigay ng halimbawa sa mga pinomeno ng wika. Isang mahalagang component siguro ng aming course pack ay yung tinatawag na learning log o reflection log ng mga mag-aaral. Ito ay requirement sa pagtatapos ng bawat module upang malaman ng guro kung ano ang naaabot na kaalaman ng mag-aaral sa pagtatapos ng bawat module. Sa klaseng online, magkahalong synchronous at asynchronous ang isinasagawa namin at mas marami ang student content interaction kaysa sa student-teacher interaction. Nais ko lang bigyan ng emphasis ang paggamit ng question log sa iskemang ito kung saan ipinapadala ng mag-aaral ng mas maaga ang kanilang mga tanong sa nabasang module. At sa mga tanong na ito, umiikot ang magiging talakayan ng guro tuwing nasa synchronous class na siya. Sa mga nagsasagawa ng synchronous sessions, hindi lahat ay regular ang pagsasagawa nito. Ang iba isang beses isang linggo, 2 beses sa isang buwan, o depende sa pangangailangan. No? At hindi required sa mga mag-aaral ang dumalo. Maaaring buksan o di buksan ng camera na may kalayaan gano'n ng mga mag-aaral. Muted ang mga mag-aaral kapag nagtatalakay ang guro at maaaring magtaas ng kamay o magkomento kung may katanungan. Maaari ding dumalo sa klase sa pamamagitan ng FB Live. Isang malaking tulong ang FB Live para doon sa mga mag-aaral na hindi kaya ng data ang makapag-Zoom. Kaya nababalikan din ang mga lektura sa klase. At panghuli po, ang ilang mga tala na ibinahagi ng aking mga kasama sa UPLD ay nakakatulong sa ang Zoom talakayan at kwentuhan. Epektibo ang pagpapanood ng mga dokumentaryo bilang case studies at mga talakayan at babasahin. Mahalaga or mahusay kung makapagsasagawa ng survey kung ilan ang makakadalo sa klase at bumatay dito kung itutuloy mo ang klase sa isang partikular na linggo. May mga pagkakataong sapat na ang isang babasahin lalo na kung may mga pagkakataon na mapag-usapan ito sa isang synchronous session. At kailangan bigyan ng sapat na panahon ang mga estudyante na magbasa at huwag maging matipid sa paliwanag sa mga synchronous sessions. Yun lamang po at maraming salamat.
Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Nais ko pong ibahagi sa inyo ang nakikita kong ilang mga hamon at oportunidad kaugnay sa pagtuturo ng Wika 1 o Filipino 40 bilang kursong pang-general education ng Universidad ng Pilipinas. Karanasan sa pangangasiwa at pamamahala sa pagtuturo at usaping pangnilalaman ng kurso ang nais kong bigyang diin bilang 2 kategoryang maaaring pag-angklahan ng ating kwentuhan tungkol sa kinakaharap nating hamon at oportunidad sa pagtuturo ng Wika 1 o Filipino 40. Kaalinsabay nito ang kinakaharap nating pandemya bilang konteksto. Sa usaping pangnilalaman po ng kurso, malinaw talaga ang tagubilin ng General Education Framework o General Education Philosophy. No? Ang Wika 1 o Filipino 40 dapat daw liberal, holistic, integratibo, nagpapalakas, nagpapagaling, nagpapaunlad, lumilinang hindi lamang ng mga nasusukat na kasanayan o kagalingan. Yun ang paborito ko eh. Hindi lamang yung mga nasusukat, no? Kundi pati na rin ang kapasidad at mga kakayahan sa kritikal at malikhaing pag-iisip at mga kilos. Dapat daw yung kurso natin makatao, makabayan, transformatibo, may malikhain at konstruktibong mga kilos para sa pag-unlad ng komunidad, ng nasyon, ng daigdig, base sa matatag na pagkaunawa sa kultural at historikal na identidad at pag-unawa sa nagkakaisang sangkatauhan. Ano pa ba ang hahanapin natin dito? Ganito kabigat, pero hindi ito dapat simpleng bigat, kundi ganito talaga dapat ang isang makabuluhang edukasyon. Dagdagan pa natin na nilalayo ng GE, kasama dito syempre yung ating Wika 1, Filipino 40, mapalawak daw ang intelektual at kultural na mga pananaw, mahasa ang kritikal at malikaing pag-iisip, mapaunlad ang masidhing pagnanasa sa pagkatuto, masidhing pagnanasa sa pagkatuto at pagtuklas ng karunungan, malinang ang matalas na pagpapahalaga sa intelektual at moral na integridad, mapatatag ang pagtatalaga sa nasyonalismo at katarungang panlipunan. Mga kapwa ko, guro, ang pagsasagawa po at pagsasakatuparan ng mga ito sa pamamagitan ng pagbuo natin ng syllabus, gabay sa kurso, course pack, mga makabuluhang kagamitang panturo, ay dapat talagang nagmumula sa mga lokal na pananaliksik. Lokal na pananaliksik, ito po ang magbibigay ng kulay, ng gulugod, at kaluluwa sa mga scholar ng bayan, anumang kurso ang kanilang kinabibilangan. Dahil ang Filipino 40 o Wika 1 ay naglalaman ng usapin sa wika, kultura, lipunan, ugnayan ng mga ito, ang wikang Filipino sa pagbuo ng pananaw pandaigdig. Ang Filipino sa iba't ibang disiplina at institusyong panlipunan. Ang wikang Filipino bilang salalayan ng kaisipan. Mabigat po yun. No? Filipino, hindi simpleng wika. Filipino bilang salalayan ng kaisipan sa pag-unlad ng anumang disiplina. Malinaw po yun, sa pag-unlad ng anumang disiplina at instrumento ng pag-uugnayan ng mga institusyon ng bansa o wika ng institusyon na nagiging makabuluhan sa buhay ng taong bayan. Ito po yung laman. Kaya sa aking palagay, isang malaking oportunidad ang kursong ito para maipakita na ang wika ay lagpas sa pagtingin dito bilang simpleng instrumento ng komunikasyon. Sa halip, ang ating kurso ay isang malaking oportunidad upang itampok ang wika sa antas ng ideolohiya. Ang wika bilang ideolohiya, ang wika ay isang ideolohikal at hindi simpleng instrumento sa pagpapaliwanag lamang ng ideolohiya. Ang wika ay isang paraan ng pag-iisip. So ito yung mga oportunidad natin na pwedeng ganito kataas ang pag-aral natin sa Filipino o wika, kultura at lipunan. Diskursal ang antas sa pag-aaral ng wika. Ang pag-unawa sa ugnayan ng mga institusyong panlipunan sa pamamagitan ng wika. Kaya isang malaking hamong kinakaharap ng kurso sa aking pagtingin at base sa aking karanasan ay ang pagharap natin sa Generation Z. Yung Gen Z. Isang henerasyon na matatawag na digital natives na pumapaloob sila sa labas. Pumapaloob sila sa labas nang hindi nakikita ang lubusang o lubusang nauunawaan ang loob. habang abalang-abala o bising-busy sa pag-unawa sa daigdig base sa kanilang karanasang virtual. Tila pinapalitan ng virtual na mundo ang ugnayan at danas na laman sa laman, hawak sa hawak, amoy sa amoy, o pisikal na danas, lalo pa ngayong isinasa konteksto natin ang kwentuhang ito ng hamon at oportunidad sa gitna ng pandemya, na kung saan ang mga hamon ay napakarami. Pansinin ang una kong naiisip. Kaya pa ba nating mag-lecture sa harap ng computer o laptop na ang kaharap mo ay larawan ng aso, robot, puno, beach, mesa, building, bisikleta, bulaklak, o stop toys? Ni hindi nga natin alam kung nakikinig pa sila eh. Hindi rin natin alam kung nandiyan pa sila. Hindi rin natin alam kung sila na nga yung mga nakaupo dyan o ibang tao na. Hindi ka naman basta makapag-require ng turn on video dahil sasabihan ka ng, "Sir, mahina po ang wifi ko." Ikalawa, ano kaya ang dapat maging disenyo ng sinkronikong klase? Pareho ba ito ng classroom class design sa ginagawa nating sinkronikong klase sa Zoom?